everybody. I hope you're doing good today. Hope you're having a blessed day. Hope you do something for God today, because that's something we're supposed to be doing every day. The title of the lesson is Doing Your Part. And everyone who claims to be a Christian, and really, let's face it, God gave the responsibility of spreading the gospel to the church. And if you're a member of the church, by being a Christian, this is your responsibility also. And a lot of people don't look at it that way, but it is. So everyone who claims to be a Christian has a duty given to them by God. And that duty is to share the gospel message to help people find their way to heaven. And the lack of knowledge is the reason many Christians will be destroyed on Judgment Day. We remember from the Old Testament, God said, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge" in Hosea 4:6. And that's because they weren't taught. And he blamed the spiritual leaders for not teaching them, but he kind of put a little bit of onus upon the actual Jews there because they weren't seeking the information to be taught. That's a problem we have today in the church. Some people are very knowledgeable of the scriptures, and others just really don't care to learn anything. And they're going to be in trouble on Judgment Day. See, in Hebrews 12:15, and this is reading from the Contemporary English Version. It says, "Make sure that no one misses out on God's wonderful kindness. Don't let anyone become bitter and cause trouble for the rest of you." So the first part of this verse is one that every Christian needs to take heed to. I mean, if our brethren are going to miss out on heaven, it better not be me that is responsible. And so we have to be there to assist others, help others get to heaven, to have a better knowledge so that they can be better Christians, and to do their part. I mean, that's what we're lacking so much in churches today, doing their part. I mean, we have, in most congregations, we have a few that are doing their part, and the rest are just spectators, I guess you can call it. And they're not doing anything to help each other get to heaven. They're not doing anything. Of course, the only thing you might say what they're doing is they're putting their money in the collection plate. I mean, they're contributing to the work. But that's the extent of it. And somehow, I just don't think that's going to fly on Judgment Day. See, Paul felt the same thing about preaching the gospel. You know, he even said, "Woe is me if I preach not the gospel." I mean, he knew what the message was, and he figured that if I don't preach the message, I'm in trouble. God's not going to be pleased with me. And so why did he feel this way? Well, because he knew that the gospel message was God's power of salvation. You know, Romans 1:16. And Paul was running out of time. He said, "My time is short. I know it's running out." And so he preached constantly because he knew that God gave him the duty to preach to the Gentiles. And Paul was also very concerned with his Jewish brethren, and he wanted them to be saved also. So if you'll study and look at the pattern of Paul, wherever he went, first place he would go would be to the synagogue and reason from the scriptures to try and save souls there, because they should have been prepared for it, should have been ready for it. And then, of course, then he would take it out into the city to the Gentiles, and they would be responding to his message. And so that's what he did. And so just think about this. If we who are Christians today would have the same goal as Paul had, trying to save everybody. I mean, if we only had the desire to help everyone become a true Christian and live in such a way as to reach heaven when this life is over, you realize what that would do to our society? You realize what it would do to the world that we live in? We're very disappointed in this world. I mean, people have turned their back on God, and they basically become anti-God. And if we could turn people around to seeking God, I mean, everything would be much better. People would treat each other nicer, and we wouldn't have all the selfishness going on that we see in our world today. And so we want to help people get to heaven. And so that's why the church is so important, because we need the strength and encouragement of our brethren. And no Christian would want to wish harm upon anybody, right? Well, you wouldn't think so. But what if you see someone heading towards danger and you just keep silent? And you know what's going to happen to them. Yeah, they're going to pay the price. They're going to hurt. They're going to get hurt. They may get killed. And if you feel nothing about that, I mean, God's not going to be happy about that. But yet we look every day, the people around us are on the pathway to hell, and we just let them go. We remain silent. I mean, how does God really appreciate that? You've got to ask that question to yourself. Does God appreciate the fact that I know they're lost, but I'm not going to say anything to them? We even have some songs like You Never Mentioned Him to Me, and stuff like that, that we really ought to think about from time to time. And so Jesus taught us to even love our enemies and those who use us in various ways. And remember that Jesus died for these people. I mean, they were hateful, they were spiteful, they hated him, and they wanted him dead, and yet he still prayed for them, and he died for them. He died for all. So each Christian should feel that it is my job to teach others about heaven. And I'm talking about every Christian needs to feel that way and do what we can. Now, some people are not going to do so because they don't have enough Bible knowledge and they're afraid they might make a mistake or they're afraid of rejection. But you know what? That's not what God said. Your job is to teach others about heaven and how to get there. And if there's going to be ignorance on the part of Christians, we know it is not because I did not teach them or try to teach them. It should not be that. It's because they made the choice not to learn, and they'll have to answer for that. But really, we should all look at it as our responsibility. The people that we go to church with, we've got to make sure that we're doing what we can to encourage them to reach heaven and do the things that are necessary to get to heaven. And then we need to go out and teach others how to get to heaven. And so we might look at it this way. It's quite obvious that many people are just not interested in the truth of the Bible. And they really haven't been taught that there's a need for the Bible because they haven't been taught about their soul and the destiny of their soul. And so they just don't know. And we think about this. You know, many people have a great knowledge in what excites them. Excuse me. Now, look how people treat their hobbies. I mean, they immerse themselves into knowing as much as possible about their hobby. See, what they do is they read books, subscribe to magazines, search the internet to acquire as much information as possible so that they will be knowledgeable about their hobby. And these types of people want to share their knowledge with others so that others might begin to share in that same hobby. And we all know people like this, that they get so involved in it, whatever that hobby might be. And should this not be the case for Christians? I mean, learning all that we can about the Bible, learning the true message from God, and sharing that message, which is so much more important than any hobby ever was. And so there's many hobbies out there, and many people are enthusiastic about their hobbies. Can you imagine how much the church would grow if we could shift the enthusiasm towards sharing the gospel message, which will impact the soul in eternity? I mean, hobbies will perish with all temporal things. The soul is going to last forever. See, if we do not share the gospel message with others, it is possible that God will consider us worthless for any good deed. So do not be guilty of depriving others of the gospel, and do not contribute to the ignorance of many souls. You know, it is your duty. If you claim to be a child of God, it is your duty to teach them. Whether they will listen is up to them, and they will have to answer to God for their ignorance or rejection of his commandments. But don't let them go off in ignorance without at least trying to teach them. Don't let that happen. See, in 2 Corinthians 5:19 in the Contemporary Version, we read, What we mean is that God was in Christ offering peace and forgiveness to the people of this world, and he has given us the work of sharing his message about peace. Yes, Paul wrote to the Corinthians that God has given us this work. This is the work that we have, sharing his message about peace. And the peace of God is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so God has done his part in providing for our salvation. Everything we need, 2 Peter 1:3. By his divine mercy, he has granted us everything pertaining to life and godliness. Yet man also has a part in their own salvation. We know that. That includes, yes, obedience to the gospel, obedience to God's commands, coupled with the faith in God to provide the blessing he has promised through Christ. And so in 1 Peter 1:22 it reads, "You obeyed the truth, and your souls were made pure. Now you sincerely love each other, but you must keep on loving with all your heart." And that's also from the Contemporary Version. If you don't have that version, get it. It's pretty good. I have found very few things which I would really call error, but it simplifies the message real easy. And so keep these thoughts in mind. Keep on loving with all your heart. And the way you demonstrate your love is to try to help people get to heaven. That's how you demonstrate your love. That's what God said about Christ. He demonstrated his love to us. God demonstrated his love by what? By trying to help people get to heaven. Christ demonstrated his love. By how? By trying to help people get to heaven and providing the means necessary. So we need to try and help people get to heaven if we want to go to heaven. Think about that. Just going along and putting a few pennies in the collection plate every week is probably not going to be enough. You need to do more. So start looking at your family members, start looking at your friends, start looking at your neighbors, and start bringing up God and talking to them about God. And yeah, some of them say, "Well, I don't want to hear it," and just walk away. But you know what? You never know if at the right time someone's heart is at a point where they need something different. And we need to be there for them. So consider those thoughts and this message. And share this message with others, because I think everyone who wears the name of Christ needs to know this message, because it is our duty. We have that duty to share the gospel message and to help people find their way to heaven. So consider these thoughts, and Lord willing, be back again tomorrow with another lesson. Bye-bye for now.